Hey, what's good, YouTube? My name's Alckemy. Welcome to the channel. Today, we're going to be talking about Compactor. Compactor, if you haven't seen any other videos on it, is a sidechain device. It is a ring mod sidechain. It can also be used as a clipper. It is very accurate dynamics control that can be time-based, but can also just be like straight up audio rate, super clean. There's a way to do this in Bitwig, and we've talked about this before, but I kind of want to go through a comparison as opposed to being like, this is what it does, and here's all the features and whatever, because there's a lot of videos that actually explain it a lot better than I could. I'm not going to lie, when I first saw this, I was like, what does this do? And the other thing that I want to talk about is that there are a lot of different ways to sidechain, and there are different use cases on why you might want to use one or the other. So we're going to kind of expand on that topic as opposed to, is Compactor worth it? Because it's free. It's part of the essentials. So why would you not grab it? If you, if you don't have kilohertz, go buy it. I don't care. Bias, all that stuff, whatever. I've been using kilohertz since 2019. So 6 years going on 7 years now. You guys know me. So yeah, if that seems interesting, subscribe to the channel. Let's go ahead and talk about this track that I've got. So I'm just going to kind of play part of this, and then we will talk about what's going on, and I will discuss the sidechain magic. So anyway, track I'm working on. What we have here is Compactor that is controlling the sidechain options, and I want to just focus on the side chisel group because what we're going to do is A/B and listen to what this is like when I normally sidechain and listen to what this is with Compactor. Now, I want to say that the benefit of Compactor is that you can pretty much just do exactly this. You can put it on, turn the release down to 0, turn the look ahead down to 0, which is the attack, and then it kind of just works. And when we're doing this in regards to Bitwig, one thing that you might want to be aware of whenever we talk about setting this up is you need to come in here, and there's this little device right there that is your sidechain device. And so there's also a thing with an Ableton, but it's a little bit more in front of your face and easy to find. However, if you're like, how do I get this to work? This is what you do. And then also you want to set the sidechain input to +3 and 4. So that's just to kind of get everything to work in the way that you want it to. So this is what this sounds like with just the Compactor. So let me do that really quick. Bitwig is being buggy. I don't know what it is, but for some reason, OBS and Bitwig have not been playing nicely lately. But take a listen to the bass right here along with the sound of the ducking. So this is with Compactor. You can kind of hear it. It's very subtle, and that's the thing with this plugin is that it's not like, oh my gosh, this does the dopest thing ever. This is a very clean way to control your dynamics. It's also incredibly simplified, and I think that that's why so many people are excited about it. For example, let's go ahead and take a listen to what I have now, which is the MIDI sidechain. And so what this is, I have a replacer on my fundamentals, so on my kick and snare via on the kick and snare via a click sender. And so anytime the audio hits past a certain threshold, it's creating a MIDI trigger, and that is going into this little segment thing right here, which is going into a tool. And so this is ducking the volume with also very precise envelopes. But the difference is that this is still time-based, and the other one is like when the kick goes, it's basically reading the incoming audio and adjusting it sample by sample. and adjusting the volume very quickly without any latency. Whereas this is just like when the trigger happens, it's going to duck for this amount of time. Why do you need to know this? Because, well, for one, there's a bunch of different ways to sidechain, but two, this was like LFO tool or a makeshift LFO tool. So this is what this sounds like with just this. Can you hear the clicks? Now you might be like, oh, Alckemy, how can you do that to your own music? Well, the thing is like when this is actually being played in context, you can't hear it. And it's not really something that I worry about. You know what I mean? It's not really something that's noticeable unless if you isolate it. But the benefit to doing this versus doing something like the ring mod sidechain is that this is for very precise stuff. People say that it's really good for bass music, it's really good for this, but I haven't really gotten a good explanation of why, and I'm going to attempt to do that. When you have a really loud track, when something is loud, most of the time the dynamics are very little, and that means that you are creating a wall of sound. And so when you have a wall of sound and you have two sounds that are colliding with each other, typically the only way to make them fit is to make one duck into the other. And so an old school practice that people would do was pretty much whenever the kick hits in, everything else is completely cut out, and then it immediately comes back up to full volume to kind of jigsaw with a singular line. With ring mod sidechaining or with something like Compactor, when the kick happens, there's a waveform that happens, right? And so what it's doing is instead of just taking the overall amplitude, it's literally carving out each of the waveforms in regards to the other sounds that it's sidechaining to in order to create a more cohesive, thicker RMS. I don't know if that made sense or not, but think of it as in it is very surgical dynamic control. And the cool thing about it is that you don't really have to do anything. You just have to tell it where to go. And that's kind of why people are like, ah, this is amazing and this is great. I'm not going to lie. I don't worry about sidechaining so much. My loudest track, which is called Your Virulence, actually, let's go ahead and pull that up, has no sidechaining in it. And I think that this is important to talk about because it's not just, is this right or is this wrong, but it's more so about, does it fit the style and the aesthetic of what you're looking for? And I don't know if that makes sense to you or not. Again, this is all just kind of like wishy-washy dynamics, mixing and stuff. But this track right here does not have any sidechaining on it. None. So we have our basses, we have our subs, and then we have our drums here, right? And part of the reason why is because I actually have a lot of drum breaks over this. So if you take a listen to this, this is going to be very loud, by the way. This is something that you don't necessarily have to, or it's not the only way in order to get a really loud sound. So here we go. 3, 2, 1. So no sidechaining on that. It's still loud. It's still a way to do that. And I want to say that with proper use of saturation, shout out to Cage, by the way, because without him, I would not be making tracks anywhere near close to this kind of thing. Saturation, and sometimes even OTT or multiband compression. And I'm not doing it as a means of sidechaining, but what's happening is sometimes when you have a wall of sound, if it's done the right way, it will literally push everything out of the way for like what's fighting for your attention. And it needs to be done tastefully. And I think that, I'm not saying that this is a good example of that. I think that it personally is, but I'm not a mix engineer and whatever. but it's something that you can pull off. And the other thing that you can do is you can consider really making sounds take turns instead of having them stack over each other. And that's something that actually has a lot of use within this track in particular. However, the problem with, maybe let me say the benefit of having multiple instances or multiple ways to know about sidechaining in the first place is because sometimes you don't just have a kick. Sometimes you don't just have a snare. So for example, I have these snares here, but this is just a loud metallic snare that only hits every other bar or so, right? And these two are taking turns. But for the most part, this right here is actually just a break, and I didn't want to pull it apart. Laziness, whatever, but this is the main beef and potatoes of this sound. It's something that I did from Superior Drummer. Now, we can take the main break, and we could try to sidechain it to this, but maybe that would be a good experiment to see if this is something that would be useful or make it sound better. I don't personally know. I'll let you be the judge. But let's go ahead and throw a compactor on this. And I am going to pull this down just a little bit. And we're going to set this here. Remember, we need to set the sidechain over this, and we need to find the main break. So there's a group called drums. And then there is the main break here. And then we're going to go to pre. And the reason why we're going to go to pre is because that way, if we're listening to the solo, it's still going to duck. Whereas if it's in post and you solo the basses and stuff, you're not actually going to be able to hear it. So now that we have that, we can take a listen to all of the basses and stuff while the drums are going and see if this is something that's going to actually help the mix. So now, I don't know if you heard that, but this is actually causing distortion now. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is something to be aware of. And it is something that it's not necessarily, yeah, it's just something that you should kind of consider. Which, in my opinion, I don't know, it might actually be cooler in context of the mix. Yeah, and so in this particular case, it's not the best example because what's going on is this ring mod sidechaining or whatever is a little bit too much. And this is actually causing distortion. And so one thing with this is that this can also be used as a sound design tool if done in a creative manner. So I think that this is really important to consider. And I think that for most cases, when you have a dedicated kick and a snare on its own channel, this can probably be your one-stop shop. But maybe something else that I should try is some of the other modes on here, because there is RMS, there is also ISP. Let's see if maybe we can get a cleaner sound through that. So with a little bit of attack and a little bit of release, this is starting to sound like it's actually ducking in the way that it needs to. But again, there's so many sounds that are happening on this main break with all of these things that have like extreme amplitude. So the problem is that this is going to be constantly ducking. And that's why I wanted to kind of paint this picture, is that it's not just like, oh, slap it on everything. It's situational. I think that almost every other content creator that I've seen talk about this is having the same discussion. So with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about something else where this could be used perhaps as a sound design tool. So what I'm going to do is I am going to grab a kick, and then I am going to grab a snare very quickly. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to grab one of mine because I know that mine are usually loud. Alck kick. Sure. Let's go Alck snare. Sure, it doesn't need to be crazy, but this is a nice little contrasting sound. And we can go ahead and just throw together a little halftime beat, kind of like this. typical. Nice. Okay, so let's go ahead and find a percussion loop now. Cool. We're going to use this just because I don't want it to fish for something all day, but we're going to go ahead and set this to repitch and make this a little bit louder. And what we can do is we can grab this and put this under this, kind of like so. Make it twice as fast. And then duplicate. I don't know what that was supposed to be, but okay. Maybe let's try this. Now, if we grab this and then we throw a compactor on here, there's a couple of things that we can try. For one, we can try to do the kick and snare. So because this is just one kick and one snare, we can actually set this to a group, set the sidechain on here into this, and go into group 3 on pre, master. One thing that I would like to see on this is it would be cool if you can actually control the output gain, just because within this, I would like to see like the abuse aspect of it, of being like push. That being said, you could probably put a pre-gain or a post-gain into it, but that would still be pretty nice if we could do that. Now, do you see how this is adding a little bit more crunch to that? Specifically on the kick. So without it. And sometimes this can actually be really cool because what you can do is you can pull something out of this, kind of like so. And what I can actually do is grab a duplicate of this, kind of like this. And now I have full control over this top layer to where I can reduce maybe, I wouldn't recommend EQing with an OTT, but you can kind of do something like that. But you can kind of boost all of this, kind of like so. And that's something that you can add for a top layer of sizzle. And this actually works really good with breaks. This works with a lot of, if you already have like a fully fledged drum thing, you can actually put it on your drum bus, something of the sort. And then we can just kind of use that Pro Q to kind of adjust it in the way that we need to. Now, something to be mindful of is, as you can hear, this is starting to phase. And so maybe we can try some of these other modes here, like maybe having a little bit of the attack or something to try to adjust it. The stereo, I think, had quite a bit to do with that. But even still, we can adjust this kind of in a way to where the phasing is not that big of a deal. It still kind of has a cool character to it. And then we can clip it at the end. And now that we actually have something that's texture like that, we can actually use another instance of Compactor. And now we can actually duck this with the same input. So we can do something like this, sidechain, and go to group 3, master, and pre. So we've got a texture layer over this, something that you can add to it. Or you can just keep this as is if you don't like the phasing. It's situational, right? So you don't really want to do this on low end. You can, but you just need to be mindful about how that is intersecting. And again, with any creative approach, you can do a lot. That being said, when this is going, So something kind of like that. And that's one way that you can kind of also get some creative aspects out of that. I would recommend you also give this a shot on other elements and whatnot, but there are certain use cases of which you would want to use sidechaining for. So for example, you might want to have very precise or different kinds of custom curves to where that would be where you might want to use MIDI or you might want to use an actual compressor. There might be some kind of character that you like that the compression aspect of it, you know, let's say you're using the glue, it just has this certain type of saturation to it. For example, the Digitone and the Digitact actually have kind of what I would say like a nice coloring compressor that does something nice and warm to the sound. Aside from that, if you want something that's really precise and you want something that's very easy to use, then the Compactor is also a great choice. So the last thing that I'm going to do is I'm very quickly going to walk you through just how to set up a template, and then we'll call it a day. And if you are enjoying the video, then do me a favor and give it a like. So we're going to delete everything off of here. And really what I have is just two groups, well, a few groups, but sidechain and drums. So what we need is a couple of groups. I'm going to grab a couple of tracks here. The first one is we're going to do this. We're going to rename this as side chisel because that's just what I do. Then we're going to group this one, rename this as drums. Let's go ahead and grab another group. We're going to rename this as kick. On this one, we're going to group this. We're going to rename this as snare. And this is just a placeholder. So we can put our kick in here. We can put our snare in here. You can also group the kick and snare together as fundamentals. That's something that I did for a few years. I don't do that anymore. But with this new group, with the last track, we can label this as pork. Cool. This is pretty much all of the grouping that I do. I do have some return channels and all that other stuff, but for the most part, this is all you really need. And so now, without doing anything else, we can set up our compactors, and we only need to do it twice. Or sorry, we only need to do it once, and then we can just duplicate it into the percussion group. So we'll set this here with 0 attack, turn this into input 3 and 4, and now we'll set the sidechain here. And we are going to set this to the kick master pre. Now we can duplicate this, and we're just going to set this to the the snare master pre. And now that we have that, we can actually duplicate this and put it inside of the percussion group. And the reason why I do this is because I have a pre-master for the drums, or like a bus, a send, a group, doesn't really matter. So even though I want my percussion to sometimes be sidechained to either the kick or the snare, I want it to also be able to have clipping on the end. So for example, something that I might do is I might add an over, kind of like this, and I might add a, reverb. So I might do something like Pro R2, where I would group this. Maybe we can just use a preset or something. Alckemy using presets. What are you doing? We can just find a room, bathroom, small, drums. Rooms for kick sustain, drum room tight, something like this. Set this mix to 100%, set a little bit of ducking, and we're going to group this and have a dry wet layer kind of like this, and then just slowly mix that in. This is something that I do on almost every track. And with the sidechain stuff, maybe something that might be worth doing is adding another clipper, kind of like so. And now, once we kind of have all that, we're kind of ready to rock, and you can kind of get your track started. On the master, this is the stuff that I usually use. I almost never use well, I have a mid side on this, which stays on, but I never use that. Glue, mono check, clipper that's not doing anything, limiter that's not doing anything, and then rolling sampler and oscilloscope. So really the only two things that are actually active are the over and the Pro L2, but those are set to 0. I don't actually push the limiter up, and that's how I get really loud sounds. So hopefully this was kind of a compactor review / use case, but also more so of a means of when and where you might want to use different kinds of sidechaining, and also how to not use sidechaining, and you know, all of the wonders of what this thing can do, also as a sound design tool. So thank you so much for watching. If you want to support the channel, alckemy.com, book a lesson with me, or check out the memberships where I've got exclusive videos. If you have any questions about this, let me know. I would also recommend watching Dash Glitch's video. I actually needed a little bit of help because I was like, what does this thing do? Full transparency, you know, I never try to pretend like I know something. That being said, here's a couple of examples. And now all of those YouTubers that were going crazy over sidechain ring mod and stuff can relax. There is also a way to do this inside of Bitwig if you don't have Compactor, which both Polarity, myself, and a few other people have videos on. It's basically audio rate modulation to the amplitude of a tool, but that's another conversation for another time. But go get this. It's free. It's free. And if you don't have the Kilohertz Essentials, go get it. It's totally worth it. I 100% I would die on a hill talking about how good Kilohertz stuff is, and they're not paying me to say anything. So thanks everybody. I'll see you in the next one, and have a great rest of your evening.